Welcome to another author advice video, and today I'm going to be talking about book categories and why you should pay attention to them, why you shouldn't put your books in the wrong categories, and it's all about genres, categories, and why they matter. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how to find your genre. And basically, you need to know what genre are in to target your readers. Because genre isn't about authors, it isn't about your book, it's about readers finding your book. So that's what you have to remember about genre. Genre is for readers, it's not for authors. Okay? So it doesn't matter if your book is fantasy, but it has romance, but it has machines and science fiction. Maybe it's a little steampunk. You need to find the main category of what your book is, the core of it. And if it's fantasy, then it's a fantasy book and it should be in a fantasy category. Now, you may have a subgenre of fantasy that you can put your book in, like maybe it is steampunk, so you would put your book in steampunk fantasy. Or maybe it is fantasy romance, so you'd put your book in fantasy romance. And this is what you need to figure out. And if you do have a mashup book, because I mean, there are some out there, you can target both genres, but you have to know what you are targeting with those genres. Fantasy fans are going to want the fantasy elements of the book. Say if it's a fantasy with a little mystery in it, if it's a fantasy mystery, fantasy fans are going to want that element. So that's what you target with fantasy fans. If you're targeting to people who like mysteries with the fantasy elements in them, then you target the mystery part of the book. So that's how you find your genre. You do a little research, and there's all you have to do is Google fantasy subgenres, and you'll come up with tons of pages, tons of categories, and I'm sure you can find something that fits your book. Talk to other authors; they'll probably have a better perspective on what genre your book should be in than you do. So if you're having trouble figuring out what genre your book is in, you know it's a fantasy, but you've got so many other elements in it, you're not sure what subgenre, you're not sure where to put it, or you know it's a mystery, but it's got other elements in it, something, anything like that. Talk to other mystery authors, talk to other fantasy authors, describe your book, ask them where they put it as a reader. And you might be surprised what they come up with, and listen to their advice. Maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't, but it might give you some ideas as to where to put your genre. So that's the first thing you need to do, is you need to know what genre your book is. Okay, and the second thing we're talking about today is how to find the right category. Now, this is uber important to put your books in the right category, especially on the retail sites, especially on Amazon, because this is how readers find your book. If a reader's going to a category, say women's poetry, like I did the other month, looking for similar books, I was looking for similar books and to check out blurbs for a poetry book I was uploading. So I went to women's poetry. Took a look at the category, and I found romance novels in women's poetry. That really made me mad, because if I was a poetry lover and I went to look for poetry books and I found romance books, especially a shifter romance book in my category, I'd be a little upset as a reader. That's not what I wanted to read. I wanted to read poetry. And what's more is that book that was at number 3 in women's poetry had displaced a poet's book. It took the spot another poetry book could have had. So you're not only doing damage to yourself, but you're doing damage to other authors when you put your books in the wrong categories. So don't do that. Plus, Amazon is now cracking down on books that are in the wrong categories, and a few authors have been reprimanded and had their accounts suspended because of it. So don't do that. Okay. So how do you know what category you need to go in? That's the big question. First of all, don't pay attention to where you're going to rank because, like I said, categories are not there for ranking. They're not there for authors. They're there for readers to find your book. Now, it's nice if you can rank in a category, sure, but do not pick your categories on whether you're going to rank in them because that's a bad idea. What you need to do is you need to find your basic two categories. When you upload your book, that's what you're given. You're given two categories. So, say your book is a fantasy romance. You're going to put fantasy. If there's a, I don't know if there's a subgenre for romance and fantasy, and maybe it's a paranormal sort of a romance. You could put it in paranormal romance as well. I mean, it just depends on what kind of categories. And like, say if it's a short story horror collection, like what I do, I put it in horror. I put it in short story anthologies or horror anthologies. You just have to look through the categories that are available in those limited two categories and find the two that work best for you. Okay, so and then you have, besides that, you can actually message Amazon through Author Central or their contact form and request 10 additional categories for your book. Now, you may not have 10 additional categories depending on what book it is, what what you can find for it. So if you don't have 10, don't try and fill up the 10 spots. Get as many as are relevant to your book. Don't throw in extra ones that you think you're going to rank in or something. Don't do that. It's not a good idea. So, how do you find these extra 10 categories? So, you can do it manually, which is I'm going to show you how to do that. You just basically you go to any book, your book or a book that's relevant to what your book is, and you can I'm gonna do the screen share here. You can I'm going to screen share. This is the categories for my book Visions and Nightmares. So I'm going to click on fantasy anthologies and short stories that are under my book here. Now that will bring you up to the Amazon bestsellers for Kindle ebooks. Now over here on the side, you can see all the categories. And right now I'm under fantasy. So, and under fantasy, you've got action adventure, alternative history, Arthurian classics. And now dark fantasy might fit my book as well. So I click on that, check out what's in dark fantasy, whether it's relevant to what I've written. And if it is, there's a category. And then you've got short stories, you've got a cult down here too, horror. Uh, so, my book definitely would fit under horror. It also would fit under, yeah, and so that's how you find categories manually. You just go on Amazon under the best-selling categories and find them. And then you have to send them in the right format for to Amazon, but they basically show you how to do that. So, and then the other thing you can do is you can use Booklink, which is a website. Here, I'll give you a screen share to that, and that is the uh, the category page on Booklink, and I'll have the links in the description for all of this. And basically, you put your ASIN or ISBN in the box at the top there in that little square. Click on the country that you want. The box right here. Click on the country, and then you click the green button here. Now, I'm going to. Oh, that's not it. Just a sec. So I'll put in my ASIN here for the book. There, we'll go with the United States. We'll click Go Find, and nothing happens. Oh no, there it is. Sorry. Okay, and there's my book, and it shows you all the categories it's in down here. Now, in order to find categories for your book, you'd find a book that is similar to yours, um, same main category. Maybe if it's a fantasy romance, you find a fantasy romance that's popular. You put that ASIN in, do the clicking, and they'll show you what categories that book is in. And then you can look through those categories and see if they would fit your book. That's another way. And the third way to find the categories is to use Publisher Rocket, which I will share here. Now, this is Publisher Rocket. And you can see right here, you can do a category search with Publisher Rocket if it decides to work here. And say your book is, if I can find the fantasy category, where is it? Oh dear. Oh, we'll go with, say your book's mystery, thriller, and suspense. And then you've got all the categories here of what your book could be in listed out for you. Now, Publisher Rocket is a paid program that you can buy and purchase and use on your desktop, your laptop, whatever. So, Booklink is free. So if you can't afford Publisher Rocket, you can use Booklink, or you can do it manually if you want. So that's basically how you find your categories. Anyway, so, and the last one we will be talking about is categories for promos. Now, you might think, well, why do we need to know this? Because I have found a lot of authors do not submit their books to group promos, newsletter swaps in a relevant way. I've run group promos for horror books across several different sites, and invariably I will have someone who has written a paranormal romance submit to a horror promo. Okay? I have news for you. Paranormal romance is not horror, and it does not necessarily appeal to horror readers. I've actually had straight up romance submitted to horror promos. So, yeah, people do need to know that don't submit a romance book to a horror promo. Don't submit a mystery book to a fantasy promo unless it's a fantasy mystery. Because readers who click on those promos, they want the books that are promised. They don't want something that's in another genre. So if a horror reader clicks on a horror promo, they want to see horror books. If a romance reader clicks on a romance promo, they want to see romance books. And if the promo is even more specific than that, say a subgenre of fantasy or a subgenre of romance, they only want that subgenre. So don't submit your books to promos that are not relevant to what your book is about. It wastes the host's time, it wastes your time, and it gives you a bad reputation as an author. So don't do it. You need to know your genre. You need to know what reader is going to want to read your book. Okay? Throwing a romance novel at horror readers isn't going to get you any sales. It's going to get people scratching their head and wondering what the heck is a romance book doing in a horror promo. If you by some miracle got accepted to it. So don't submit your books to the wrong types of promos. And that goes double for newsletter swaps. Be careful. You don't want to swap a fantasy book for a mystery book because mystery readers, who the people who subscribe to that mystery writers newsletter want mystery books. They might be fantasy readers, maybe some of them are, maybe, but the majority of them, they want mystery books. So they're not going to click your link. They're going to click the other mystery book that she's included, or the maybe there's two mystery books that she's included that month, or he, and they're going to click those links, and they're not going to click yours. So you need to find a book and an author when you're doing newsletter swaps that are relevant to your book you're offering. Now, if you do multiple genres like I do, sure, you can submit your fantasy book to a fantasy newsletter swap or a fantasy promo, and maybe your my poetry book, I can submit that to a poetry newsletter or a poetry promo, and I could submit my horror book to a horror newsletter and a horror promo. So, I mean, you can do that, but I'm not going to submit my straight up fantasy book to a horror promo because nobody's going to want to read that who are looking at that particular promo or that particular newsletter. So don't do that. That's a no-no. So, because when you come down to it, all categories are ways to target and sell your book to readers. And if you're not targeting your book to the right readers, you're not going to sell your book. So this is why you have to pay attention to the categories. You have to submit to the right categories, and you have to know your genre when you're submitting. Anyway, and that's it for author advice for today. And I hope you found this enlightening and helpful. So that's all for now. And bye.